especially harrowing. This video, which does include clips some of you may find distressing, shows Reuters journalists in action on the front lines. It'll also show you the faces of some of the Reuters journalists who have lost their lives, bringing us the accurate and impartial news for which we are known. After it is played, our Middle East and North Africa editor Edmund Blair will introduce 3 journalists who have been leading our coverage here since the war in Gaza and the conflicts in the region erupted. So let's play that video.
I think those images really speak for themselves in many ways. I think it's worth taking a moment. That last shot you saw is the last shot that Fadl Shana, one of our cameramen, ever shot. But it's a real pleasure to introduce you to 3 journalists with Reuters of a range of service with us, who have been behind the camera and behind the stories that we report. Samia Nakhoul, who you know from this morning, our global foreign policy editor who spent many years covering this region. Labib Nasir, who is head of Middle East and North Africa visuals, and Maya Gebeily, who's our Beirut-based Bureau Chief for the Levant, covering Lebanon, Syria, and the rest of the Levant. I want to come to Samia first. You've covered this region over many years. You were Middle East editor for many years before you took your latest role. You've started since the Lebanon civil war and through pretty much every conflict since then. And it's worth noting that one of those images that you saw flash past was actually Samia when she was wounded in Iraq in 2003. So you've really been at the front end of the challenges of reporting this region. What's changed over the years, and has it just become more dangerous?
I think the mission hasn't, sorry, can you hear me? The mission hasn't changed, it's basically to bear witness, to uncover the story, to tell the truth, but the terrain has become much more treacherous, Journalism in this part of the world has always been risky and hard. But really now the battlefield is full of minefields, Journalists have been targeted directly. I mean, we consider to the enemies. Like I recall, like when Isam, our colleague, was killed, he was wearing the flak jacket, he was wearing the helmet, but he was still being targeted. And at the same time, our Hussam al-Masri at the hospital, he was among 5 people killed in August. So again, what has been targeted is the live footage. Every time you have live footage, because it's exposing atrocities, it's exposing crimes and killing, they're being targeted. Although they said it was a Hamas, but our investigation showed it wasn't Hamas. So what has changed in the past, the challenge was access to information, access to the source, access to the story. That was the main challenge. But right now, there are so many challenges, including, the risk is higher because technology is helping them also, Whoever wants to target a journalist, your iPhone has become your enemy. They can trace you, they can hack you. In the past, we covered story, we're not hacked. Now, hacking continues. They monitor you, your movement. Through AI, they can target you. So technology it's an advantage for us because, we can transmit stories from the feed. We can, but again, technology has become something that they can use against us. And, in the conflict, like in this conflict, since the Gaza war, 235 journalists have been killed and media, fixers. In Iraq, we had 285 were killed, among them 7 of our journalists, and 3 of us were seriously wounded. So the risk is bigger, and we are being treated as really the enemy of the truth because we are exposing so many. If it weren't for us, so many stories would not be told, so many atrocities would not be uncovered. So we are the lens, we keep the checks basically on them.
Thank you. And it's interesting you point to technology on obviously Labib. This is where you've done a remarkable job with the team continuing to show what's happening on the ground. I think it was notable when the last situation where the hostages and Palestinian prisoners were released and the hostages were handed over. You were running 3 live streams from Gaza despite the hardships of delivering that to the world. It really was remarkable to see it across global channels. But how do you do it? How do you? What was the biggest challenge you have in keeping the footage rolling through these kind of crises and conflicts?
So it's challenging all throughout. From deployment to publishing and beyond. You got to pick the right profile to have access. Samia talked about access being a challenge. It remains a challenge. Let me give you an example. You saw the video. You saw Libya. It was a natural disaster in Derna, which falls in the east. So you want to deploy somebody to Derna. You cannot fly into Tripoli and then go to Derna. You have to fly into Benghazi because there's competing governments. Then when you do make it into Derna, actually the government that rules is not necessarily in sync with the people inside Derna. So the way you report on the story becomes challenging. The way the government challenges you and tries to control your message becomes challenging. The way the people react to you coming to put a camera in their face in their moment of grief or moment of death, it can be challenging. Technology, we use technology to try to avert risk. Safety is a big issue. We have lost many colleagues, and also very recently. So wherever we can, we're deploying remote-controlled cameras to avoid human cost. And what you referred to with the 3 lives out of Gaza, it was actually a sad reality because the line of sight in Gaza now, with no buildings, gives you a better connectivity than you ever imagined you could get, and you're getting it from the other side. So we were able to have very high-quality lives using smartphones and other equipment. So the challenge is in every aspect of the work, including when I said publishing and beyond. You're competing against deadlines. You're trying to remain competitive, and you give the same product to often competing channels or networks, and they get the same product, but then they go out in their language, and then you get the feedback. And I often say, as long as everybody's upset with us, then we are doing the right thing. So, yeah.
Thank you. Maya, you were in Beirut when the bombs were falling. You were there when the Hezbollah pages blew up. And then you were sort of whiplashed straight into the fall of Assad. and the incredible dramatic changes we've seen there. Maybe you can walk us through some of the reporting you've done that, well, you know, I guess I would say this, wouldn't I? But that we deliver that probably others can't.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say right off the bat that it's very much a team effort, not just the team that's on the ground and not just the team that is really working under extraordinary circumstances to stay focused, to stay disciplined, to stay true to the trust principles, but it's also a marrying of that team with other colleagues at Reuters who have a set of skills that we don't have. Colleagues who can look at company records, colleagues who look at ships, colleagues who help us track down companies in Taiwan that produce these pagers. So that investigation, for example, was really the first time that I got to see really Reuters at its best in absolute crisis mode. And we had to put that investigation together with the threat of Israeli tanks rolling across the border into Lebanon. So we had a very, very active news file that was still very hot. And we had to figure out how we were going to tell the story of how these pagers were rigged and how they blew up, and who they hurt in the process. And so it was a lot of traditional reporting in the sense that there was a source that I would call every single day and say, show me a pager, show me a pager, show me a pager. And he was telling me, there's a ground invasion underway. What do you mean, show me the pager? And it was just about convincing that source through a lot of persistence. But then what happened on the other side of the world was trying to track down these Taiwanese pager makers and figure out how they were connected, whether they weren't, and that took a lot of investigating and sleuthing online, and it took a lot of also really gumshoe journalism halfway around the world. And so it was being able to marry those different skill sets. And I think, I really would encourage everybody, if they haven't done so yet, to read the mass graves investigation that Reuters just published last week. Again, as you said, it was very much whiplash. I mean, we had to go from one devastating war in Lebanon to really a historic event in Syria where a 50-year regime fell essentially overnight. And that involved input from Samia, it involved input from visuals. It really could not have been possible if it wasn't everybody working together in sync over the course of the last 10 months. But the story that was published last week, I think, is a really important one because it shows, really, I think it was a masterclass for the team putting it together in putting together the sourcing on the ground of people that were actually involved in the mass grave movements in Syria, moving bodies from one mass grave to another. It took hours and hours of individually shot drone images stitched together to produce higher quality images than satellite imagery can do. So really, I mean, now we're thinking about satellite imagery as kind of a regular thing that we can incorporate into our stories. So that investigation took it to the next level. So I think what we're always trying to do is trying to bring all the different skill sets at Reuters together. Everyone is learning from one another, and I think what that produces is a product that really kind of sets the bar very high.
Thank you. And so really what you've painted is a picture of both the technology we need to use and, frankly, the just wearing out your shoe leather in trying to beat down the doors to get the information. Which leads into another question, Samia. Sourcing. This is one of the biggest challenges is getting the sources, but building the trust, building the confidence, and those can be in officials, companies, wherever. But on the other hand, we're often delivering stories that people, perhaps even those sources themselves, aren't that comfortable with, aren't happy with. How do you navigate that very difficult path with making sure we continue to deliver hard-hitting news that is going to challenge the authorities, that is going to challenge what the information they want to deliver, and yet keeping those sources on side and willing to talk to us? How do you build those contacts?
I mean, the most important thing for me is always the reporting from the field. This is where you trust, you see, you witness, you report, you check, you talk to people, you have witness account. So, whatever government think, with all our respect to government, but, the reporting starts from the base. So when you build the story from the base and you have it bulletproof, then you can go to the government or sources. They might deny it, but you keep on using multiple sources to check that your account is right. And if they don't want to comment, they don't comment. If they want to deny the story, I always tell them, okay, deny the story, if you want. And normally they don't put denial. They know that your story is right. But at the same time, they kind of respect you. Deep down, they know that, every time there is a story, like I remember an official who complained about a story that I wrote calling my editor-in-chief at 11 o'clock in London, that we have a campaign against Lebanon then. Anyway, once before he was calling me, there was a story that you had from Pakistan, and he wanted the Reuters story because he said, I trust Reuters, what did you say? Can you say it? Do you have more on the story? And when I confronted him, I said, why do you trust us on the Pakistan story? And, you don't. And he knew that the story, but he said, oh, you're the daughter of this country, you have to help us. I said, I work for Reuters. but then they respect you when they know the facts are right, But sometimes also, you are threatened, because I remember once I had a massacre. I went to a morgue. I saw that there was a massacre. I reported it. I called the TV. They came and they filmed. And the French got an investigation. And then it was the Syrian regime. And they called a leader. And they called me. They said, you reported about 21. They're going to be 22. So in this case, you have to leave the country. You have, there are always risks. But you don't. I never not publish a story because I'm scared of the circumstances. The truth is more important. But we don't take, it's not taking being irrational. It's just the story has to be published, basically.
But it gets to an interesting point, an important point. I mean, this balance that we're constantly striving for, this making sure that we're seeking comment, and we really are seeking comment. And I guess it's worth really emphasizing that with what doesn't always get seen, what obviously doesn't get seen, is the stories that don't get published or the stories that get changed, precisely because we've sought that comment and listened and fed it in and fed it into our reporting.
Yeah, we wait on the story. We don't publish immediately. We give them 1 day, 2 days, it depends. But then we say we're publishing. Tomorrow at 5 o'clock we're publishing. If you want to put your comment, we're ready. So at least we feel we do our due diligence, basically.
And Labib, a lot of points raised there. I mean, part of it is, people on the ground in Gaza in particularly in this conflict, but all around the region that you have to manage. But one of the all these images that we see, so many of them are on social media. You can almost see them. You just do a scroll through TikTok, through X, through whatever. You're going to see these. What is it that we provide that's different in the images? Aren't just images images?
No, in this day and age, it's very dangerous to assume that all images are images. In social media, we have actually a video verification team that uses social media as one of their sources, and we verify and we source the video before we can put our stamp on it and say it's good to go. And that's why our clients trust us. There is video on social media, but it doesn't cover for the work that we do. We are bearing witness. We are on the ground. We are documenting what's happening, and it's happening with professional journalists who often have to be creative. It's not just a technology, and it's not just a simple, camera operator. It's a proper journalist looking at what's going on, reporting back to the rest of the team so that the reporting can be bulletproof. And today with AI, it's even while there are advantages, we can take a video and have it shortlisted or transcribed much faster than we once used to. There's even a more important need for people in the field who can provide verified content to our clients from a trusted source, because these videos will become very difficult to spot as the technology improves. So we continue to remain ahead of the technology, and we deploy and use tools to make sure that we are current and we are relevant and we are thinking about the needs of our clients before they come.
Can I add here on the verification team? I mean, they're doing an amazing job, because recently in June there was a footage which was on social media that was picked up by international organization about the attack when Israel attacked Iran. It was about the Evin prison. Yeah. And they said they attacked the prison, and it turned to be an old footage of the prison. But our team verified that it was in June, and they saw that the tree was bare, and it shows that it was in autumn. It was the previous year in a different situation, and there were no debris. And the same when Yemeni Air was playing also. So two videos, like they were fake fabricated, but they were used by outlets.
No, and it's an interesting point, this whole, verifying the visuals, using the visuals for our reporting. Maya, you were deeply involved, obviously, in the really tragic event of Issam Abdallah, who was killed at the very beginning of the conflict. And one of the issues there was, while it seemed obvious, we needed to prove what we all believed to be the case in terms of who fired the shot. Just walk us through some of the reporting efforts that went into basically pinning it down that it was an Israeli fire.
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously Reuters was heavily criticized in Lebanon for not immediately publishing or kind of pointing the finger at Israel. And I think what we set out to do, even though they were extraordinarily difficult circumstances for the Bureau, who had lost not just a colleague, but a friend and somebody who we considered a family member, really, what we set out to do with again, the help of Reuters colleagues elsewhere as well, was to establish answers to questions that hadn't even been asked yet, which were, what exactly was fired at the group of 7 journalists that were on this hilltop? It was 3 international agencies that were there. Where was it fired from? Why were there 2 tank strikes? What happened afterwards? So we really were trying to ask ourselves questions and set the bar quite high in terms of the answers, but also the way that we were going to pursue those answers. So we actually went on the ground and picked up fragments of the shells ourselves, took them to a lab in The Hague to be tested. That lab had also tested and examined all of the visual and sound elements that we had brought them as well. So there was physical evidence in terms of the actual physical fragments, shell fragments that we had picked up, and then there was the digital evidence that we had brought them, every camera footage and sound recording that had been filmed that day in that area. And again, and this is why people often see this kind of this wording in Reuters stories. Reuters stitched together these reporting accounts to find this, because it's true. We really do stitch together all of these different reporting methodologies to provide as complete of a picture as we could. And that picture, ultimately, that emerged by the end of 2023, we published in December 2023, was that Israel had fired 2 tank rounds at a group of 7 journalists, followed up with more than a minute of gunfire from the same location within Israel, and that obviously killed Issam, left an AFP journalist, Christina Asi, without the use of her legs, and was an extraordinarily traumatic experience so early on in this war that unfortunately then produced more and more and more similar cases. We obviously, unfortunately, had to do the same thing with the Nasir Hospital investigation just 2 months ago. And so I think one of the things that has been so heavy for journalists across the region is the fact that we're kind of, we want to be able to say never again, and unfortunately we're not able to say that because we're continually seeing these attacks on journalists. So I think, again, that publication, that report came out nearly 2 years ago now, investigating Issam's killing. We still have not received a response from the Israeli military. And this is what we do. We put out the maximum amount of evidence, the strongest reporting possible on the table, and then now we wait for the response, which should come.
Thank you.
So our universe is big, and what keeps us ahead of everybody is we have our checks and balances. So, it's easy to get caught up with emotions when your colleague that you are seeing and living with every day is killed. But then you have the bigger Reuters family that contributes to the reporting, and there comes the checks and balances and the approach and how to move about things. And the same thing happens with safety when we deploy safety. Gives their assessment, it's safety versus editorial, and then we decide together where to go. So there are many stops on the way that we, as Reuters, can put in place because our universe allows us to do so and because it's best practice.
I mean, maybe just briefly, and we'll come to some of the questions, particularly this one on the trajectory of tensions at the moment in the region, and we'll try and plug some of your brains on that. But just in terms of the security protocols that we have to go through when you're, particularly for visuals, because you really are on the front line of things. Maybe you can just walk through some of the steps that we need that we work on to really determine whether it's worth it, whether the risks are overbearing or not.
So it's a case by case. A proposal comes, we need to go cover Let's say, for example, there's shooting in the West Bank, or a settler attack in the West Bank. Do we deploy somebody there? If we deploy them, how quickly can they get there? What's the mitigation? Security does their assessment. Do they need a security advisor with them? Are they the right profile? You don't want to send the wrong profile to the wrong place and then, have your own problem as well to deal with on top of the coverage. So you would, write the pitch, put the proposal out, hear back from security, they do the mitigation, and they classify it, amber, red, or green, and based on how risky it is, you have to get an editor's approval before you can proceed. And then every step of the way, we are, geolocating everybody, we are following step by step, we are flexible, ready to make a second plan if need be, ready to abandon plan if must. It works well because, the safety has nothing to do with editorial, and editorial has nothing to do with safety. So it's a proper checks and balance system that we have in place.
That's great. Well, let's take a slight change of trajectory. About trajectory, we have a question here. How do you assess the trajectory of geopolitical tensions in the Middle East over the next 12 months, particularly the implications of the Israel-Iran conflict? So a really, really simple question, Samia.
We have to ask Netanyahu and Khamenei, actually. So, I think it's going to be probably the year of Iran, over the next 12 months, whether a nuclear deal is going to be brokered or not. And if not, then again, I think Iran is going to be under a tight spot. Israel will unleash maybe not a war, but attacks, surgical attack, different kind of attacks, spy attacks will continue. And how Trump is going to deal with an Iran that is not going to accept a deal will be also a big question. I think Iran is going to be a big story. Plus, Gaza hasn't been solved yet. We have a ceasefire, we have hostages released, but then all the other loopholes are still there. Will Hamas disarm? If Hamas doesn't disarm, will the war continue? So there are so many things, that are still unresolved. But again, Hezbollah in Lebanon, which is refusing to disarm. And the war it's simmering. The conflict is simmering now. It hasn't ended yet. A big chunk, they weakened Hezbollah. They weakened, they told Iran that they can attack, that Iran knows that it will be attacked again, but they're still there. They still have capacity. So that is the year to watch, basically. We're going to be busy. You're going to be very busy for the next year.
Yeah, I think we're going to be very busy. Maya, interesting question here about the Syria, how you're sort of navigating the Syria conflict. It was a fascinating, incredibly dramatic moment where suddenly these non-state actors, which you had been talking to for many years, suddenly they were in a position of authority. I think we've known that that's sometimes been rather challenging. How did you navigate your way through that? What were the biggest difficulties in working your way through that environment?
Yeah, just in the beginning to reestablish that contact in the first place was kind of funny because there were a lot of these Syrian opposition contacts that we hadn't spoken to in years because I think like a lot of people, we had looked at Syria and thought, this is going to stay like this for a while. Like Bashar al-Assad is possibly weak, but everyone tried to get him out, and he's still there. So it doesn't look like he's going to go anytime soon. And, in late November, we just woke up one morning, the same day as the ceasefire in Lebanon had taken hold, and so we thought we were going to get some respite. And we just really, like you said, whiplash, just turned our attention east, and we were starting to look at what was happening next door. And we had to, go back and dig out these phone numbers and try to remember the names and the nom de guerre of all these people that we'd been talking to 10 years ago and figure out where they were and try to track the fighting. But in terms of then, I think that, the term source of authority is kind of an interesting one because in many contexts, the authorities are not necessarily your sources. The authorities are not going to be the ones that are going to share the most complete and true version of events. And so often what we had to do was actually rebuild contacts from the ground up and spend a lot of time, like our teams did, the enterprise teams and the visuals teams that were there, spend a lot of time meeting people in remote villages and towns, meeting people in hotel lobbies, just gathering as much reporting and really starting to construct our understanding of Syria from level 0 and build it up. And what that does is that then makes us much more confident in what we've reported out, because if the authorities are going to counter with another point or counter with another narrative, then we can then have a really strong body of reporting. So really it's about building up the sources and building up the knowledge. When regime change happens, you have to kind of do it all over again from the very beginning, and then that makes you the authority in a way on a subject.
And how have the authorities thought, what have they thought of our coverage?
I mean, a lot of the work that we've done has been challenging for a new government that is just coming to terms with a massive influx of journalists from all around the world who are coming and who are writing different types of stories. And I think a lot of the ones that we've written and a lot of the ones that the team has focused on, the subjects that the team has focused on, have been difficult, have been challenging, have kind of unearthed a lot of the most complicated and maybe even the most painful parts of the legacy of the last 50 years and the kind of the birthing pains of a new Syria. I see red, so I'm gonna wrap up there.
Right. Well, very quickly, Labib, I'm not going to go to another question, but one of the things that strikes me about handling this conflict is the people are often reporting who are living it as well. It's not the foreign correspondent going in there. It is local people dealing with the tragedy that on their doorstep that's affecting them and reporting. I mean, how do you manage that? And let's keep it brief.
It's very difficult to manage. We offer support, mental, physical. We try to make anything available that we can make available to people working. And it's not just the people on the field. It's also, vicarious trauma is a real thing. When you receive all this footage, what you see is what's been edited, what's been picked as appropriate for the public. What you don't see is often a lot more gruesome. So, I mean, you've seen the images. Our guys in Gaza had to deploy a donkey cart because fuel was hard to come by. But then they joke about, they couldn't get hay for the donkey anymore, so we had to find another way to cover. But, we remain creative. We try to have a sense of humor. We are in touch all the time. We offer the proper support that could help. And CIC, we have our support system. But it helps. It helps. It's a community and it's a village, and that's how we function.
Well, I guess with we'll continue working like a community and continue to have to be very inventive in reporting this region. But thank you very much, and thank you very much for listening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
On time.
Thank you, Edmund. Thank you to the panel. Thank you for doing what you do and bringing us the news and uncovering the truth. Look, I always find these Reuters panels, editorial sessions fascinating. How they do what they do so well. I found this one especially humbling, so thank you very much indeed. Right, I'm going to take a breath because we are going to change tack now, and it's quite a big tack to the money flows. Heavy investment in infrastructure and public-private partnerships has transformed the economy in the Middle East, of course.